Welcome to the most relaxing journey through time you'll ever experience. I'm here to share an incredible story that will transport you to a world of ice and survival, where our ancestors created architectural wonders that would amaze even today's engineers. For the next 2 hours, let yourself drift into the fascinating world of Ice Age homes. Close your eyes if you want, get comfortable, and let my voice guide you through this amazing tale of human creativity and survival. Tonight, we're going to discover the shocking truth about how so-called cavemen actually lived. Forget everything you think you know about primitive people huddling in dark caves. The reality is far more incredible. Our ancestors built sophisticated homes that were warmer, more efficient, and better designed than many modern houses. They created underground cities, portable palaces, and bone fortresses that protected entire communities through winters so harsh they would kill us in hours. This isn't just a story about survival, it's about human genius, community cooperation, and the incredible power of working together against impossible odds. So settle in, relax, and prepare to be amazed by the true story of humanity's greatest architects. If you're enjoying this peaceful journey into the past, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps this channel grow and brings you more of these long, relaxing deep dives into history. Chapter 1: The Great Ice Age. Mystery. Picture this scene in your mind. It's 25,000 years ago. The world is locked in ice. Massive glaciers cover most of Europe and North America. The temperature rarely rises above freezing, even in summer. Now, imagine you're standing on a vast wind-swept plain in what we now call Ukraine. Snow stretches to the horizon in every direction. The wind howls constantly, carrying ice crystals that sting your face like needles. This is the world our ancestors faced every single day. But here's what's truly amazing. Not only did they survive in this frozen wasteland, they thrived. Hidden beneath the snow of this ancient landscape were some of the most incredible homes ever built. Homes that could house 20 or 30 people in warmth and comfort. Homes built from the bones of giants. The first clue to this mystery was discovered by accident in 1965. A Ukrainian farmer was digging a cellar for his house when his shovel struck something hard. He thought it was a rock, but when he dug deeper, he found something that made him call the authorities immediately. It wasn't a rock, it was a mammoth skull. But not just one skull. As archaeologists carefully excavated the site, they found dozens of mammoth skulls, all arranged in a perfect circle. What they had discovered was the foundation of a house. But not just any house. This was a home built from the bones of nearly 100 mammoths. The skulls formed the foundation. Massive leg bones created the walls, and enormous curved tusks arched overhead to form the roof. Think about that for a moment. 100 mammoths. These weren't small animals. A full-grown mammoth stood 12 feet tall and weighed as much as 4 elephants. The bones from just one mammoth would weigh several tons. But here's the truly incredible part. This wasn't the only house they found. The site, called Prehistoric, contained the remains of at least 4 of these massive bone houses. Each one was perfectly designed to trap heat and block the freezing wind. How did people with no machines, no metal tools, and no written instructions manage to build these incredible structures? How did they move bones that weighed hundreds of pounds each? How did they know how to arrange them to create a house that would stay warm all winter? The answer reveals something amazing about our ancestors. They weren't primitive at all. They were brilliant engineers who understood physics, teamwork and architecture better than we ever imagined. But the Mammoth Bone houses were just the beginning. As archaeologists dug deeper into the mystery of Ice Age homes, they discovered something even more incredible. These ancient people didn't just build one type of house. They had developed an entire range of architectural styles, each one perfectly suited to different needs and situations. They built underground cities that used the earth itself as insulation. They created portable homes that could be assembled in hours and taken down just as quickly. They invented heating systems that were more efficient than modern fireplaces. They developed insulation techniques that kept their homes warmer than many apartments today. What if I told you that these Ice Age architects solved problems that modern engineers are still working on? What if their building techniques were actually superior to some of our current methods? The story we're about to explore will change everything you thought you knew about human history. It will show you that intelligence, creativity, and the power of working together have been the keys to human survival for tens of thousands of years. And the most amazing part? We're still discovering new sites, still uncovering the secrets of these incredible Ice Age homes. Who knows what other architectural wonders are still buried beneath the snow, waiting to tell us their stories. Let's begin our journey by examining the most spectacular of all Ice Age homes, the Mammoth Bone Fortress. Chapter 2: Mammoth Bone Fortresses. Close your eyes and imagine the most incredible construction project in human history. Picture a team of skilled workers, but instead of modern tools, they have only sharp stones and wooden handles. Instead of steel and concrete, their building materials are the bones of giants. This is the story of how Ice Age people built homes that were truly monuments to human ingenuity. Homes that required the bones of nearly 100 mammoths to complete. The Mammoth Bone House at Mzhirich wasn't just thrown together randomly. Every bone was carefully selected and placed for a specific purpose. The foundation was made from the heaviest, most stable bones, the massive skulls. These skulls, each one weighing as much as a small car, were arranged in a perfect circle. The rounded tops faced inward, creating a stable base that could support enormous weight. Between the skulls, the builders placed the curved lower jawbones, locking everything together like pieces of a giant puzzle. But why mammoth bones? Why not wood or stone like other ancient people used? The answer shows just how smart these Ice Age architects were. Mammoth bones had several amazing properties that made them perfect building materials. First, they were incredibly strong. These bones had evolved to support animals that weighed up to 8 tons. They could easily handle the weight of a roof covered in earth and snow. Second, they were naturally curved. The ribs and leg bones had exactly the right shape to create domed roofs and rounded walls. These curved shapes were perfect for shedding wind and snow. Third, mammoth bones were hollow. This made them lighter than solid stone, but just as strong. The hollow spaces also provided natural insulation, helping to keep heat inside the house. But perhaps most importantly, mammoth bones were available in huge quantities. During the Ice Age, mammoths died from cold, disease, and old age. Their bones accumulated in certain areas, creating natural boneyards, where builders could find all the materials they needed. However, even with all these advantages, building a mammoth bone house was an enormous challenge. Just imagine the logistics involved. First, the bones had to be collected. This meant travelling across frozen landscapes, sometimes for many miles, to find mammoth skeletons. Then each massive bone had to be cleaned, prepared, and somehow transported back to the building site. A single mammoth's skull weighed over 200 pounds. The leg bones were even heavier. The curved ribs that formed the walls could be 12 feet long and weigh as much as a person. Moving these bones required incredible teamwork. Groups of people had to work together, using ropes made from animal sinew and wooden rollers to drag the bones across ice and snow. But the real genius was in how they put everything together. The builders had figured out the principles of engineering that we still use today. They knew that a circular foundation was stronger than a square one. They understood that curved walls could withstand wind better than flat ones. They realized that the weight of the bones themselves would help hold the structure together. The walls were built using a technique that was pure genius. Long bones were stacked horizontally, with shorter bones used as spacers. This created a wall that was incredibly strong but also had natural insulation properties. The roof was perhaps the most impressive part. Enormous mammoth tusks, some over 10 feet long, were curved into arches that met at the center of the house. These tusks created a dome that could support the weight of earth and snow while shedding wind like a modern airplane wing. But what really made these houses special wasn't just their construction, it was how warm and comfortable they were inside. If you could step inside one of these mammoth bone houses on a winter day 25,000 years ago, you would be amazed. Outside, the temperature might be 30 degrees below zero. Inside, it could be a comfortable 60 degrees. How was this possible? The builders had discovered the secrets of thermal mass and insulation. The heavy bones absorbed heat during the day and slowly released it at night. The curved walls created air pockets that trapped warm air. The thick covering of earth and animal hides provided insulation that was better than many modern materials. At the center of each house was a carefully designed fireplace. Not just a simple fire pit, but an engineered heating system with stone-lined walls that stored heat and gradually released it throughout the house. These weren't temporary shelters. Archaeological evidence shows that some mammoth bone houses were used for decades, maybe even centuries. They were permanent homes where families raised children, told stories, and passed down the knowledge that kept their communities alive. But here's what's truly incredible. Recent discoveries suggest that some sites had multiple mammoth bone houses arranged in villages. These weren't isolated families struggling to survive. These were organized communities with sophisticated social structures. What does this tell us about Ice Age people? It reveals that they were capable of long-term planning, complex cooperation, and incredible engineering skills. Building a mammoth bone house wasn't just about survival, it was about creating a home that would last for generations. Think about the dedication this required. Every person in the community had to contribute their skills and labor. Hunters had to find and kill mammoths. Workers had to process and transport the bones. Engineers had to design and oversee construction. Craftspeople had to create the tools and materials needed for assembly. This level of cooperation and organization challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric humans. These weren't primitive cave dwellers. They were sophisticated people with advanced technology and complex societies. But the mammoth bone fortresses were just one solution to the challenge of Ice Age survival. Our ancestors were incredibly resourceful. They developed many different types of homes, each one perfectly adapted to specific needs and environments. Next, we'll explore perhaps the most ingenious solution of all: the underground cities that used the earth itself as protection against the deadly cold. Chapter 3: Hidden Underground Cities. Imagine discovering a secret that's been hidden beneath your feet for thousands of years. Picture archaeologists carefully brushing away dirt and suddenly realizing they've found not just a house, but an entire underground city. This incredible discovery has happened multiple times across Europe and Asia. Beneath ordinary-looking hills and fields, researchers have found elaborate networks of underground homes that housed hundreds of people during the worst of the Ice Age. These weren't simple caves or holes in the ground. They were carefully engineered underground cities with sophisticated heating systems, storage areas, workshops, and living spaces. They represent some of the most advanced architecture of the ancient world. The key to understanding these underground cities is realizing that Ice Age people had discovered something that modern architects are just beginning to appreciate. The Earth itself is one of the best insulators available. Just 3 feet beneath the surface, the ground maintains a relatively constant temperature year-round. While the surface might freeze to 30 degrees below zero, the underground temperature stays around 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. This might not sound warm, but it's the difference between life and death. With just a small fire for additional heat, an underground home could maintain comfortable living temperatures even during the worst blizzards. But building underground required solving some serious engineering challenges. How do you keep water from flooding your home when the snow melts? How do you get fresh air without letting in the cold? How do you create enough space for an entire family without the roof collapsing? Ice Age architects solved all of these problems with ingenious techniques that we're still studying today. First, they chose their locations carefully. Underground homes were always built on high ground or gentle slopes where water would naturally drain away. They never built in valleys or low areas where water might collect. The construction process was incredibly sophisticated. Builders would first mark out a large circle, sometimes 20 feet across. Then they would begin the back-breaking work of digging down into the frozen ground. This wasn't easy. The earth was often frozen solid to a depth of several feet. Workers used bone picks and stone tools to slowly chip away at the ice and dirt. It could take months of work to excavate a single house. But here's where their engineering genius really showed. As they dug down, they didn't create straight walls. Instead, they carved the walls at a slight angle, wider at the bottom than at the top. This created incredibly strong walls that could support enormous weight without collapsing. The floor was always dug deeper in the center than around the edges. This created a natural drainage system that carried away any water that might seep in. Once the excavation was complete, the real construction began. A wooden framework was built inside the pit, usually made from whatever trees were available. In some areas, this might be pine or birch. In others, builders used mammoth ribs or other large bones. This framework supported a roof made from layers of different materials. First came a layer of branches or reeds, woven tightly together. Over this went a layer of animal hides, carefully sewn together to create a waterproof barrier. But the most important layer came last. Tons of earth were piled on top of the hide roof, sometimes 3 or 4 feet thick. This earth provided incredible insulation and made the house virtually invisible from the surface. The entrance was usually a covered tunnel or ramp that sloped down from ground level. This design prevented cold air from flowing directly into the living space and created an airlock effect that helped maintain the indoor temperature. Inside these underground homes, archaeologists have found evidence of incredibly sophisticated living arrangements. There were separate sleeping areas for different families, workshops for making tools and clothing, storage rooms for food, and central gathering areas around carefully designed fireplaces. The heating systems were particularly impressive. Instead of simple fire pits, these underground homes had stone-lined hearths with elaborate ventilation systems. Smoke was channeled through carved passages that carried it up and out of the house while retaining as much heat as possible. Some sites show evidence of central heating systems where a single large fire provided heat for multiple connected rooms through a network of underground channels. This is technology that we think of as modern, but Ice Age people were using it 20,000 years ago. The comfort level in these underground cities must have been incredible. While surface temperatures plunged to deadly levels, families could live underground in relative warmth and comfort. Children could play safely, adults could work on complex projects, and everyone could sleep peacefully, knowing they were protected from the harsh world above. But perhaps the most amazing discovery is that many of these underground cities were connected. Tunnels linked individual homes, creating networks that allowed people to visit neighbours, share resources, and maintain community connections without ever going outside during the worst weather. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of these underground communities housed hundreds of people. They were complete cities with specialised areas for different activities. There were workshops where people made tools and clothing, storage areas where food was preserved for winter, and meeting areas where the community gathered for important decisions. These discoveries have completely changed our understanding of Ice Age society. Far from being small bands of nomadic hunters, many groups were living in permanent settlements with complex social organizations and advanced technology. But what's really fascinating is how these underground cities were abandoned. In many cases, archaeologists find evidence that people left suddenly, taking their most valuable possessions but leaving behind tools, pottery, and other items. What caused these mass migrations? Climate change, perhaps, as the Ice Age gradually ended and temperatures warmed? Competition with other groups? Or did they simply find better locations and decide to move on? We may never know for certain, but what's clear is that these underground cities represent one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements. They show that our ancestors were capable of incredible ingenuity, planning, and cooperation. The techniques they developed, using earth for insulation, creating airlock entrances, designing drainage systems, are still used by architects today. Modern earth-sheltered homes use many of the same principles that Ice Age people discovered through trial and error 20,000 years ago. But underground cities weren't the only solution Ice Age people developed for staying warm. They also mastered the science of fire and heat in ways that might surprise you. Chapter 4: Masters of Fire and Heat. Fire was life for Ice Age people. Without it, they would have died within hours in the brutal cold. But controlling fire and using it efficiently required knowledge and skills that took thousands of years to develop. What's amazing is how sophisticated their understanding of fire and heat actually was. These weren't people just making crude bonfires and hoping for the best. They were thermal engineers who understood heat transfer, ventilation, and fuel efficiency better than many people today. Let's start with their fireplaces. When we think of Ice Age people, we might imagine them sitting around simple campfires, but archaeological evidence reveals something much more sophisticated. Inside their homes, Ice Age people built carefully engineered heating systems that maximized heat output while minimizing smoke and fuel consumption. These weren't just holes in the ground with some burning wood. They were complex devices that showed a deep understanding of physics and engineering. The typical Ice Age fireplace was lined with carefully selected stones, but not just any stones. The builders chose rocks that could absorb and store large amounts of heat without cracking when they got hot. These stones served as thermal batteries. During the day, when the fire was burning, they absorbed heat. At night, when the fire died down or was banked with ashes, the stones slowly released that stored heat, keeping the house warm for hours after the flames went out. The shape of the fireplace was also carefully designed. Most were built as shallow bowls rather than deep pits. This shape exposed more of the fire to the room, radiating heat more efficiently. The bowl shape also created better airflow, which made the fire burn hotter and cleaner. But here's where their engineering really showed. Many Ice Age fireplaces had sophisticated ventilation systems. Instead of just letting smoke escape randomly, they created channels and airways that controlled exactly where the smoke went. Some fireplaces had multiple levels. The main fire burned in the lower level, while upper chambers captured and circulated hot air throughout the house. It was like a primitive but effective forced air heating system. The fuel they used was as interesting as the fireplaces themselves. Wood was often scarce during the Ice Age, especially in the open tundra where many groups lived. So they became experts at burning other materials. Mammoth bones, for example, made excellent fuel. The hollow bones contained fat and marrow that burned very hot and for a long time. A single mammoth leg bone could provide heat for an entire night. Animal dung was another important fuel source. When dried, it burns cleanly and produces steady heat. Ice Age people collected and stored vast quantities of dried dung for winter fuel. They also learned to make charcoal, which burns much hotter than wood and produces less smoke. Archaeological sites often contain evidence of charcoal production areas, where wood was slowly burned in low oxygen conditions to create this superior fuel. But managing fire wasn't just about building good fireplaces and finding fuel. It was also about keeping the fire alive. In the harsh conditions of the Ice Age, letting your fire go out could be a death sentence. Starting a fire from scratch with primitive tools was difficult and time-consuming. It could take hours of work with flint and steel or fire sticks to create a spark and nurse it into flame. In cold, wet conditions, it might be impossible. So Ice Age people became masters of fire maintenance. They developed techniques for banking fires that could keep coals alive for days or even weeks with minimal attention. Banking involved covering the coals with a layer of ash or dirt that cut off most of the oxygen. This kept the coals from burning completely, but maintained enough heat that they could be quickly rekindled by adding fresh fuel and blowing on them. Some groups assigned specific people to be firekeepers. These individuals had the crucial responsibility of making sure the community fire never went out completely. It was a job that required constant attention and was vital for everyone's survival. The tools they used for fire management were also sophisticated. Archaeological sites contain carefully crafted bellows made from animal hide that could blow air onto coals to restart fires quickly. There were specialized tongs made from bone or antler for moving hot coals safely. They made fire-resistant containers from clay or carved stone that could hold coals for transport. When groups moved from one camp to another, they could carry live coals in these containers, ensuring they would have fire at their new location. But perhaps the most impressive aspect of their fire technology was how they used heat for purposes beyond just staying warm. Ice Age people understood that controlled heat could be used to improve their tools and materials. They learned to heat treat flint, a process that made stone tools sharper and more durable. They used fire to bend and shape wood for spear handles and other implements. Heat was essential for food preparation. They developed techniques for smoking meat that could preserve it for months. They learned to cook in ways that made tough foods tender and nutritious. They even used fire for lighting. By creating torches and oil lamps, they could extend their working hours and make their homes brighter and more pleasant during the long, dark winter nights. The social aspects of fire were just as important as the practical ones. The hearth was the center of Ice Age community life. This was where families gathered to eat, work, and tell stories. The warmth and light of the fire created a sense of security and togetherness that was essential for group survival. Around the fire, knowledge was passed from one generation to the next. Children learned by watching adults work. Stories were told that preserved important information about hunting, weather patterns, and survival techniques. The fire also provided protection from dangerous animals. Most predators were afraid of fire, and would avoid areas where flames were visible. A well-maintained fire could keep a family safe through even the most dangerous nights. What's truly remarkable is how efficient their heating systems were. Modern studies have shown that a well-designed Ice Age fireplace could heat a house using less fuel than many modern heating systems use. This efficiency was crucial for survival. Fuel was often difficult to find and required enormous amounts of work to collect and prepare. Wasting fuel could mean the difference between surviving the winter and freezing to death. The mastery of fire and heat that Ice Age people achieved was one of their greatest technological accomplishments. It allowed them to survive in environments that would quickly kill anyone without this knowledge. But fire alone wasn't enough. They also needed homes that could be moved when resources became scarce, or when they needed to follow migrating herds. This challenge led to another incredible innovation, the portable home revolution. Chapter 5. The Portable Home Revolution. Imagine needing to pack up your entire house and move it to a new location in just a few hours. For many Ice Age people, this wasn't just a possibility, it was a way of life. Not everyone could live in permanent mammoth bone houses or underground cities. Many groups were nomadic, following herds of reindeer, bison, and other animals across vast distances. These people needed homes that were warm, comfortable, and completely portable. The solution they developed was nothing short of revolutionary. They created homes that could be assembled in a few hours, taken apart just as quickly, and carried by a small group of people. These portable homes were so well designed that their basic principles are still used today. The foundation of the portable home revolution was the discovery of the perfect geometric shape, the cone. This shape appears over and over in Ice Age portable homes, and for good reason. A cone is incredibly strong for its weight. It sheds wind and snow naturally. It encloses the maximum amount of space with the minimum amount of materials, and it can be constructed using simple, lightweight frameworks that fit together like puzzle pieces. The basic structure was elegantly simple. Long, thin poles were arranged in a circle and tied together at the top to form a cone-shaped frame. This frame was then covered with carefully prepared animal hides that had been sewn together to create a weatherproof envelope. But the engineering that went into these simple-looking structures was incredibly sophisticated. Every detail was carefully planned to maximize warmth, strength, and portability. The poles used for the frame were specially selected and prepared. They needed to be strong enough to support the weight of the hide covering, flexible enough to bend without breaking, and light enough to be carried long distances. In areas where trees were available, builders used long, straight saplings that were carefully seasoned and treated. Where trees were scarce, they used other materials like mammoth ribs or specially shaped pieces of antler. The key innovation was making the frame modular. Instead of using one-piece poles that would be difficult to transport, they developed systems of shorter poles that could be connected together. These sections could be bundled and carried easily, then quickly assembled at the new campsite. The hide covering was perhaps even more impressive than the frame. Creating weatherproof hides required incredible skill and knowledge of chemistry, biology, and engineering. The process began with selecting the right animals. Reindeer hides were preferred because they had natural insulation properties and were relatively lightweight. But bison, horse, and other animal hides were also used depending on what was available. The hides had to be processed using techniques that took weeks to complete. First, they were carefully skinned to avoid any cuts or holes. Then they were scraped to remove all fat and meat, which could rot and weaken the hide. Next came the tanning process, which used animal brains and other natural chemicals to make the hide flexible and waterproof. This was skilled work that required precise timing and technique. Finally, the hides were sewn together using sinew thread and bone needles to create large panels that could cover the entire frame. The seams had to be absolutely waterproof, which required special stitching techniques and waterproof sealants. The finished hide covering was a marvel of Ice Age technology. It was completely waterproof, provided excellent insulation, and was flexible enough to withstand high winds without tearing. But the real genius was in how these portable homes were designed for different climates and conditions. Groups that lived in extremely cold areas used double-walled construction with an inner layer of soft furs and an outer layer of waterproof hides. The airspace between the layers provided extra insulation. For windy areas, they developed special anchoring systems using heavy stones or buried stakes to keep the home secure during storms. In areas with heavy snow, they designed steep angled roofs that would shed snow before it could build up and collapse the structure. The interiors of these portable homes were just as carefully designed as the exteriors. Every square foot of space was used efficiently. There were designated areas for sleeping, cooking, storage, and work. The central fire was the heart of the portable home, just as it was in permanent houses. But portable fireplaces had to be lighter and easier to set up than permanent ones. They developed systems using portable stone hearths that could be quickly assembled and dismantled. Smoke management was crucial in these sealed structures. They created adjustable vent systems at the top of the cone that could be opened or closed depending on wind conditions. This allowed smoke to escape while keeping rain and snow out. The efficiency of these portable homes was incredible. A skilled team could set up a complete house for a family of 6 in less than 2 hours. Taking it down took even less time. The entire house could be packed onto sleds and moved by the same family that lived in it. Archaeological evidence shows that some groups moved their entire villages several times a year, following seasonal resources and avoiding harsh weather. These migrations could cover hundreds of miles, yet families could maintain comfortable homes throughout their journeys. The social organization required for this lifestyle was complex and sophisticated. Everyone in the group had specific responsibilities for packing, moving, and setting up the portable homes. Children learned these skills from an early age, ensuring that the knowledge would be passed down through generations. Different families specialized in different aspects of the technology. Some became experts at hide preparation, others at frame construction, still others at selecting and preparing campsites. This specialization led to trade networks that spanned vast distances. Groups that lived in areas with good trees might trade poles to groups in treeless areas. Those with access to certain animals might trade hides for other materials. The portable home revolution had profound effects on Ice Age society. It allowed people to exploit resources over much larger areas than would have been possible with permanent homes. It enabled them to avoid conflicts by moving away from hostile groups. It helped them survive climate changes by relocating to more favorable areas. But perhaps most importantly, it gave them flexibility. When conditions changed, and they changed frequently during the Ice Age, groups with portable homes could adapt quickly. They could move to new hunting grounds, escape from natural disasters, or find better shelter from storms. This flexibility may have been one of the keys to human survival during the Ice Age. While other species were trapped in shrinking habitats, humans could pick up their homes and move to wherever conditions were best. The legacy of the portable home revolution lives on today. The tipis of Native American plains tribes, the yurts of Central Asian nomads, and even modern camping equipment all use principles that were first developed by Ice Age people. But portable homes were just one part of a much larger technological revolution. Ice Age people were developing secret survival technologies that gave them incredible advantages over the harsh environment they lived in. Chapter 6: Secret Survival Technologies. Deep in the archaeological record lie secrets that reveal just how advanced Ice Age technology really was. These weren't primitive people using crude tools and hoping for the best. They were sophisticated inventors who developed technologies so effective that many are still used today. Some of their most important innovations were almost invisible, small tools and techniques that made the difference between life and death in the harsh Ice Age world. Let's start with one of their most crucial inventions, the needle. This might seem like a simple tool, but the needle with an eye was a revolutionary breakthrough that changed everything about how humans could survive in cold climates. Before the needle, clothing was crude and ineffective. Animal skins could be tied or wrapped around the body, but they couldn't be fitted properly. This meant gaps where cold air could enter, making it nearly impossible to stay warm in extreme conditions. The needle changed all of that. For the first time, humans could create fitted clothing that sealed out cold air completely. They could make layered garments that trapped warm air close to the body. They could create waterproof outer layers and soft, insulating inner layers. But making a needle was incredibly difficult with Ice Age technology. The needle had to be thin enough to pass through hide, but strong enough not to break. The eye had to be perfectly formed to hold thread. The point had to be sharp enough to pierce tough materials. Ice Age toolmakers solved these problems using techniques that required incredible skill and patience. They used thin slivers of bone from birds or small mammals, carefully shaped and polished with abrasive stones. The eye was created by drilling through the bone with tiny stone points, a process that could take hours for a single needle. These needles were precious possessions, carefully maintained and passed down through families. A skilled sewer with good needles could mean the difference between a family that stayed warm and one that froze. The thread they used was equally sophisticated. Sinew from animal tendons was processed to create incredibly strong waterproof thread. Plant fibers were twisted into cordage. Hair from various animals was spun into different types of thread for different purposes. With needles and thread, Ice Age people could create clothing that was better than many modern garments. They developed layering systems that are still used by Arctic explorers today. They made waterproof boots, insulated mittens, and warm hats that could keep people comfortable in the most extreme conditions. But clothing was just one application of their sewing technology. They also used it to create the covers for their portable homes, storage bags, water containers, and countless other essential items. Another secret technology was their mastery of food preservation. In a world without refrigeration, being able to store food safely for months was crucial for survival. They developed multiple techniques for preserving meat, fish, and plant foods. Smoking was one method, using controlled fires to slowly cook and dry foods while adding preservative chemicals from the smoke. Freeze drying was another technique, taking advantage of the natural cold to freeze food solid, then allowing the moisture to slowly evaporate in dry air. This created lightweight, long-lasting foods that could be stored for years. They also perfected fermentation techniques that could preserve foods while actually improving their nutritional value. Fermented foods provided essential vitamins and minerals that helped prevent diseases common in harsh environments. Salt, where it was available, was used for curing meats and fish. But in areas without natural salt deposits, they developed other preservation methods using plant chemicals and specially prepared animal fats. The containers they used for food storage were sophisticated pieces of technology in their own right. They made waterproof bags from animal stomachs and bladders. They carved containers from wood and sealed them with animal fats. They even created early forms of pottery in some areas. These storage technologies allowed Ice Age people to accumulate food surpluses that could carry them through bad hunting seasons or harsh weather. This security gave them time to develop other technologies and arts. Another secret was their mastery of material science. They understood the properties of different materials and how to modify them for specific purposes. Take flint, for example. This stone was essential for making cutting tools, but raw flint often had impurities that made it difficult to work with. Ice Age toolmakers learned that heating flint to specific temperatures could improve its properties dramatically. Heat-treated flint was easier to shape, held sharper edges, and was less likely to break. The process required precise temperature control and timing, showing that these toolmakers understood thermal dynamics and material properties at a sophisticated level. They also developed composite materials by combining different substances to create new properties. They mixed plant fibers with animal glues to create early forms of plywood. They combined different types of stone to make tools that were harder and more durable than either stone alone. Their understanding of chemistry was also advanced. They knew which plants contained useful chemicals for tanning hides, treating wool wounds, or preserving foods. They understood how to extract and concentrate these chemicals for different purposes. Some groups developed early forms of metallurgy, using naturally occurring copper to make small tools and ornaments. They learned how to heat and shape metal, and even how to combine different metals to create alloys with improved properties. Perhaps most impressively, they had sophisticated knowledge of human anatomy and medicine. Archaeological evidence shows that they could perform complex medical procedures, including brain surgery, bone setting, and tooth extraction. They developed an extensive pharmacology based on plant and animal medicines. They understood how to treat wounds, infections, and various diseases using natural remedies that were often remarkably effective. This medical knowledge was crucial for survival in their harsh environment. Injuries and illnesses that might be minor problems today could be fatal in the Ice Age without proper treatment. Their tools for medical procedures were as sophisticated as their other technologies. They made scalpels from obsidian that were sharper than modern surgical steel. They created bone needles for suturing wounds. They developed trepanation tools for drilling holes in skulls to relieve pressure from head injuries. The social organization required to maintain all of these technologies was complex and sophisticated. Different individuals specialized in different crafts, from tool-making to medicine to food preservation. Knowledge was carefully passed down through apprenticeship systems that ensured important technologies wouldn't be lost. Master craftspeople trained younger people in the secrets of their trades. This specialization allowed Ice Age communities to maintain technological capabilities that would have been impossible if everyone had to be an expert in everything. But perhaps the most important secret technology was their understanding of cooperation and social organization. They developed systems for making collective decisions, resolving conflicts, and coordinating complex group activities. These social technologies were just as crucial for survival as their material technologies. A group that could work together effectively had enormous advantages over one that was plagued by internal conflicts. The archaeological record shows evidence of sophisticated trade networks that connected groups across vast distances. This allowed specialized technologies to spread rapidly and enabled communities to access resources and materials that weren't available locally. All of these secret technologies combined to give Ice Age people capabilities that were far beyond what we typically imagine for prehistoric humans. They were innovative, knowledgeable, and highly skilled people who had mastered their environment through centuries of accumulated wisdom and technological development. But individual technologies were only part of the story. The real secret to Ice Age survival was how these technologies were integrated into complex community life that supported and protected everyone in the group. Chapter 7: Community Life in Ice Age Villages. Step into an Ice Age village on a winter evening 20,000 years ago. The harsh wind howls across the frozen landscape, but inside the warm homes, life continues with surprising comfort and complexity. This isn't the brutal, desperate existence we might imagine. Archaeological evidence reveals that many Ice Age communities were sophisticated societies with rich cultural lives, complex social structures, and remarkable levels of cooperation. The village might contain anywhere from 50 to several hundred people, living in various types of homes we've already explored. The largest and most elaborate houses belonged to extended families or served as community gathering places. Smaller homes housed individual families, while specialized structures served as workshops, storage areas, and meeting places. The social organization of these villages was carefully structured to ensure everyone's survival and well-being. This wasn't a matter of simple family groups struggling independently. These were complex societies with specialized roles, shared responsibilities, and sophisticated systems for making collective decisions. At the heart of village life was the principle of mutual support. Everyone understood that their individual survival depended on the success of the entire community. This created a powerful motivation for cooperation and sharing that helped these communities thrive even in the harshest conditions. Leadership in Ice Age villages was typically based on skill and experience rather than inherited authority. The best hunters, the most skilled toolmakers, the wisest elders, and the most effective healers all played important roles in community decision-making. Different people took leadership roles for different activities. The most experienced hunter might lead hunting expeditions, while the most skilled builder directed construction projects. The most knowledgeable healer made medical decisions, while the wisest elder helped resolve disputes. This distributed leadership system ensured that the community could draw on the best expertise for each situation. It also prevented any one person from having too much power, which could lead to conflicts that might threaten group survival. The daily rhythm of village life was carefully organized around the seasons and the available resources. During the brief summer months, everyone worked intensively to gather and prepare resources for the long winter ahead. Hunting parties would range far from the village, following herds and returning with meat, hides, and other materials. Plant gathering expeditions would collect berries, nuts, roots, and medicinal plants. Fishing groups would take advantage of seasonal runs of salmon and other fish. But summer was also the time for major construction projects. New houses were built, old ones were repaired, and improvements were made to the village infrastructure. Tools were manufactured, clothing was sewn, and equipment was prepared for the winter months. As winter approached, the pace of activity would change. The focus shifted from resource gathering to resource management and processing. This was the time for making tools, preparing hides, preserving food, and creating the countless items needed for comfortable winter living. Winter was also the season for cultural activities. The long dark evenings provided time for storytelling, music, art, and the transmission of knowledge from older to younger generations. The importance of these cultural activities cannot be overstated. They served multiple crucial functions that went far beyond simple entertainment. Storytelling was how important information was preserved and passed down. Stories contained crucial knowledge about hunting techniques, weather patterns, dangerous animals, edible plants, and countless other survival skills. But stories also served to reinforce social bonds and community values. They taught children how to behave, what was expected of community members, and how to resolve conflicts peacefully. Music and dance were equally important. They provided emotional release during the stressful winter months, created opportunities for social bonding, and served as expressions of community identity and pride. Art was another crucial activity. The creation of decorative objects, cave paintings, and carved figurines served both practical and spiritual purposes. These items were often traded with other communities, creating valuable connections and exchange relationships. The role of children in Ice Age villages was complex and important. From an early age, children were integrated into the economic and social life of the community. They weren't simply cared for until they became adults. They were active contributors to community welfare. Young children helped with simple tasks like gathering plant materials, tending fires, and assisting with food preparation. As they grew older, they took on more complex responsibilities and began learning specialized skills. The education of children was a community responsibility. While parents played a primary role, children also learned from grandparents, aunts and uncles, and other community members who had specialized knowledge. This system ensured that important skills and knowledge were preserved even if individual families faced tragedy or hardship. It also meant that children had access to the best teachers available for different subjects. Girls typically learned skills related to plant gathering, food preparation, hide processing, textile work and childcare. But they also learned about tool-making, hunting and other skills that might be needed in emergencies. Boys learned hunting, tool-making, construction, and other skills associated with male roles. But they also learned about plant gathering, food preparation, and childcare, ensuring they could contribute to all aspects of community life. This cross-training was crucial for survival. In small communities, everyone needed to be capable of performing multiple roles. Specialization was important, but flexibility was essential. The treatment of elderly people in Ice Age villages reveals a great deal about the values and priorities of these communities. Rather than being seen as burdens, elderly people were valued for their knowledge, experience, and wisdom. Older people who could no longer participate in physically demanding activities like hunting or construction often took on roles as teachers, advisors, and keepers of community memory. They were the repositories of crucial knowledge that could mean the difference between survival and disaster. Archaeological evidence shows that many Ice Age communities cared for disabled and elderly members who required assistance. This wasn't just compassion, it was recognition that these individuals made valuable contributions to community welfare. The disposal of the dead in Ice Age villages also reveals important aspects of their social organization and beliefs. Burial practices were often elaborate, with bodies accompanied by tools, ornaments, and other grave goods. These burial practices suggest belief in some form of afterlife, but they also served important social functions. The effort invested in proper burial ceremonies helped maintain social bonds and community identity. The trade networks that connected Ice Age villages were extensive and sophisticated. Communities exchanged not just material goods, but also information, technologies, and people. High-quality flint from specific quarries might be traded across hundreds of miles. Shells from coastal areas have been found at inland sites. Amber from the Baltic region has been discovered in sites across Europe. These trade networks served multiple functions. They allowed communities to access resources that weren't available locally. They provided backup support during times of crisis. They facilitated the spread of new technologies and ideas. But perhaps most importantly, they created social connections that helped prevent conflicts between groups. Communities that traded regularly were less likely to fight with each other, creating zones of peace that benefited everyone. The seasonal gatherings where multiple communities came together for trade and social activities were highlights of the Ice Age social calendar. These gatherings provided opportunities for young people from different communities to meet and form relationships, preventing the genetic problems that could arise from isolation. They also served as forums for sharing information about resource availability, weather patterns, and other crucial survival information. Knowledge gained by one community could quickly spread to others through these networks. What emerges from the archaeological evidence is a picture of Ice Age village life that is far more complex, sophisticated and successful than we typically imagine. These weren't desperate people barely clinging to survival. They were thriving communities with rich cultural lives and advanced social technologies. But this success made their eventual disappearance all the more mysterious. What happened to these sophisticated Ice Age villages? Why did this way of life come to an end? Chapter 8: The Mysterious Disappearance. The end of the Ice Age brought dramatic changes that transformed the entire world. But for the sophisticated communities we've been exploring, these changes presented challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. Around 15,000 years ago, the climate began to warm significantly. The massive ice sheets that had covered much of Europe and North America started to melt. Sea levels rose, flooding coastal areas where many communities lived. The landscapes that had supported Ice Age life for thousands of years changed beyond recognition. At first glance, this warming might seem like it would have been welcome news for Ice Age people. Warmer temperatures should have made survival easier, not harder. But the reality was far more complex and challenging. The problem was that these communities had spent thousands of years perfecting technologies and lifestyles that were specifically adapted to Ice Age conditions. Their entire way of life was built around the assumption that the world would remain cold, that certain animals would be available, and that familiar resources could be found in predictable places. When the climate changed, many of these assumptions became invalid almost overnight. The large herds of mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, and other megafauna that had been the foundation of Ice Age economy began to disappear. Some species, like the mammoth, went extinct entirely. Others migrated to different areas or changed their behavior patterns in ways that made them much harder to hunt. The reliable food sources that had supported large communities for generations suddenly became scarce or unavailable. The changing landscape created additional challenges. As the ice melted, many areas became swampy and difficult to travel through. Rivers changed course, flooding some areas while leaving others without water. Familiar landmarks disappeared under rising seas or were transformed by changing vegetation patterns. These specialized technologies that had been so successful during the Ice Age became less useful in the new environment. The massive bone houses that had provided excellent shelter during harsh winters were unnecessary in the milder climate. The elaborate cold weather clothing was too warm for the new conditions. Even more challenging was the fact that the new environment favored different survival strategies. Instead of the nomadic hunting lifestyle that had been so successful during the Ice Age, the changing world began to favor more settled agricultural approaches. Plants that had been minor food sources during the Ice Age began to thrive in the warmer, more stable climate. Wild grains became abundant in many areas, offering the possibility of more reliable food sources than hunting could provide. But taking advantage of these new opportunities required different skills, different tools, and different social organizations than Ice Age communities had developed. The knowledge and technologies that had made them so successful in the ice world were not well suited to the emerging warm world. Archaeological evidence suggests that many Ice Age communities tried to adapt to the changing conditions. Some sites show evidence of people attempting to domesticate plants and animals, experimenting with new tool technologies, and modifying their housing styles for the warmer climate. But the transition was difficult and not always successful. The archaeological record from this period shows evidence of population decline, site abandonment, and cultural disruption across much of Europe and Asia. Many of the sophisticated technologies we've explored simply disappeared from the archaeological record. The knowledge of how to build mammoth bone houses was lost when mammoths went extinct. The elaborate techniques for processing megafauna hides became unnecessary when smaller animals became the primary prey. Some communities were more successful at adapting than others. those that lived in areas where the climate change was less dramatic or where new resources became available were more likely to survive the transition. Groups that had already developed some plant processing technologies or that lived in areas where early agriculture was possible were better positioned to take advantage of the new opportunities. But many of the most sophisticated Ice Age communities simply vanished from the archaeological record. Sites that had been occupied for thousands of years were suddenly abandoned. Complex technologies disappeared. Elaborate art traditions came to an end. This wasn't necessarily a catastrophic collapse. In many cases, it appears that people gradually moved away from traditional Ice Age lifestyles and adopted new ways of living that were better suited to the changing world. The descendants of Ice Age people didn't disappear. They became the ancestors of later hunter-gatherer groups, early farmers, and eventually modern humans. But the specific cultural traditions and technologies that had been so successful during the Ice Age were largely abandoned. In some cases, we can trace the transformation process through the archaeological record. Sites show gradual changes in tool technologies, housing styles, and food sources over several generations. The transition was often slow and complex rather than sudden and dramatic. But in other cases, the archaeological record shows more abrupt changes. Sites that had been continuously occupied for thousands of years were suddenly abandoned, with no clear indication of where the inhabitants went or what happened to them. These mysterious disappearances have puzzled archaeologists for decades. Did these communities die out completely? Did they migrate to new areas that haven't been discovered yet? Did they transform so completely that we can no longer recognize them in the archaeological record? Recent research has provided some clues. Genetic studies of modern populations have revealed that most people living in Europe and Asia today carry genetic markers that can be traced back to Ice Age populations. This suggests that most Ice Age people didn't disappear completely. They evolved into later populations, but the cultural continuity is much less clear. Very few of the specific technologies, art styles, or cultural practices that characterized Ice Age communities survived the transition to the post-Ice Age world. This cultural discontinuity represents one of the greatest losses in human history. Thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, sophisticated technologies, and cultural achievements were essentially lost when the Ice Age ended. The elaborate architectural knowledge that allowed people to build comfortable homes from mammoth bones was forgotten. The sophisticated understanding of cold weather survival that had been developed over thousands of years became irrelevant. The complex social organizations that had allowed large communities to thrive in harsh conditions were no longer necessary in the more abundant post-Ice Age world. In many ways, the end of the Ice Age represents a fundamental transformation in human history. It marked the end of one of the most successful and sophisticated prehistoric cultures, and the beginning of the trajectory that would eventually lead to modern civilization. But it also represents a reminder of how vulnerable even the most successful human societies can be to environmental change. The Ice Age communities had survived and thrived for thousands of years, developing technologies and social systems that seemed perfectly adapted to their world. Yet when that world changed, even their remarkable achievements couldn't save them from transformation or disappearance. Their story offers both inspiration about human capability and warning about the challenges of adapting to environmental change. The mysterious disappearance of Ice Age communities remains one of the most intriguing puzzles in human prehistory. But recent archaeological discoveries are beginning to shed new light on this ancient mystery. Chapter 9: Archaeological Discoveries That Changed Everything. In the past few decades, archaeological discoveries have revolutionized our understanding of Ice Age life and forced us to completely reconsider what these ancient people were capable of achieving. These discoveries have been so dramatic and unexpected that they've overturned many of the basic assumptions that archaeologists had held for generations about prehistoric human capabilities. One of the most significant discoveries was made in the 90s at a site called Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic. Archaeologists working there uncovered evidence of what may be the world's first industrial complex, a sophisticated facility for mass-producing ceramic objects over 29,000 years ago. This discovery was shocking because it pushed back the date for ceramic technology by thousands of years. Previously, archaeologists thought that pottery and ceramic work didn't develop until much later in human history, during the agricultural revolution. But at Dolní Věstonice, researchers found elaborate kilns, thousands of ceramic fragments, and evidence of specialized ceramic production techniques. The people living there weren't just making simple pottery for storage, they were creating complex artistic objects and even primitive forms of sculpture. The implications of this discovery were enormous. It showed that Ice Age people had mastered high-temperature technology and sophisticated manufacturing techniques much earlier than anyone had imagined. Another revolutionary discovery was made at Pavlov in the same region of the Czech Republic. There, archaeologists found evidence of textile production that was far more advanced than anyone had expected for this time period. The site contained thousands of textile impressions preserved in clay, showing that Ice Age people were weaving complex fabrics using techniques that weren't supposed to have been invented for thousands of years. These textiles weren't simple animal hides roughly sewn together. They were sophisticated woven materials with complex patterns and designs. The technology required to produce them would have required specialized tools, skilled craftspeople, and organized production systems. Even more surprising was the discovery at Pavlov of what appears to be evidence of planned settlement layout. The arrangement of houses, workshops, and storage areas suggests that these communities were using sophisticated urban planning principles to organize their settlements efficiently. This challenges the traditional view of Ice Age people as nomadic hunters who built temporary shelters wherever they happened to stop. Instead, it suggests that at least some groups were creating permanent, well-organized communities with specialized areas for different activities. Recent discoveries in Siberia have been equally revolutionary. At sites like Malta and Buret, archaeologists have found evidence of Ice Age communities that were far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined possible in such harsh environments. These Siberian sites contained elaborate houses built from mammoth bones and tusks, but they also revealed evidence of long-distance trade networks, sophisticated art traditions, and complex social organizations. Perhaps most surprisingly, genetic analysis of remains from these Siberian sites has revealed that these people were closely related to both European and Native American populations. This suggests that these sophisticated Ice Age communities may have been the source populations for the people who eventually colonized the Americas. This discovery has completely changed our understanding of human migration patterns and the peopling of the New World. It suggests that the ancestors of Native Americans weren't primitive nomads who stumbled across the Bering Land Bridge, but sophisticated people with advanced technologies and complex social organizations. Another series of groundbreaking discoveries has come from underwater archaeology. As sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age, many coastal settlements were flooded and preserved beneath the ocean. Recent advances in underwater archaeological techniques have allowed researchers to explore these submerged sites for the first time. What they've found has been astonishing. Off the coast of Europe, archaeologists have discovered the remains of elaborate settlements with stone buildings, complex harbour facilities, and evidence of maritime technologies that were thought to have been developed much later in human history. These underwater sites suggest that Ice Age coastal communities were far more advanced than land-based sites had indicated. They had developed sophisticated boats, navigation techniques, and marine resource management systems. Some of these underwater discoveries have revealed settlements that were much larger than any previously known Ice Age sites. One site off the coast of Denmark appears to have housed several thousand people, making it larger than many medieval towns. The preservation conditions underwater have also allowed archaeologists to recover organic materials that normally would have decayed long ago. This has provided unprecedented insights into Ice Age technology, art, and daily life. Wooden tools, textile fragments, food remains, and even preserved human bodies have been recovered from these underwater sites. These materials are filling in huge gaps in our understanding of Ice Age culture and capabilities. Perhaps the most revolutionary recent discovery has been the recognition that Ice Age people were sophisticated astronomers and mathematicians. At sites across Europe, archaeologists have found evidence of lunar calendars, astronomical alignments, and complex mathematical calculations. The famous cave paintings at Lascaux and other sites are now being reinterpreted as sophisticated astronomical documents that recorded celestial observations and calculations. The positions of animals and symbols in these paintings may represent star maps and lunar calendars that were used for navigation and seasonal planning. Stone circles and other megalithic structures that were previously thought to date from much later periods are now being recognized as Ice Age constructions. These structures show that Ice Age people had advanced knowledge of geometry, engineering, and astronomy. The implications of these discoveries are staggering. They suggest that Ice Age people had developed scientific knowledge and mathematical capabilities that weren't supposed to have existed for thousands of years. Recent advances in genetic analysis have also revolutionized our understanding of Ice Age populations. DNA extracted from ancient remains has revealed that Ice Age communities were much more diverse and interconnected than previously thought. Genetic evidence shows that people were traveling vast distances and maintaining contact across continents. There was much more gene flow between distant populations than traditional archaeological models had suggested. This genetic evidence also suggests that Ice Age populations were much larger than previously estimated. Instead of small isolated bands struggling for survival, it appears that there were substantial populations spread across the Ice Age world. These larger populations would have been capable of supporting the kind of specialized crafts, complex technologies, and sophisticated social organizations that recent archaeological discoveries have revealed. Another major breakthrough has come from improved dating techniques. New methods for dating archaeological sites have shown that many Ice Age achievements are much older than previously thought. Sites that were thought to date from 15,000 years ago are now being dated to 25,000 or even 30,000 years ago. This pushes back the timeline for human technological and cultural development by thousands of years. These new dates also suggest that Ice Age people had much more time to develop their sophisticated technologies and social systems than previously believed. Instead of rapid cultural development under pressure, it appears that these achievements were the result of gradual accumulation of knowledge over many thousands of years. The combination of all these discoveries has forced archaeologists to completely reconsider their understanding of Ice Age human capabilities. Far from being primitive survivors, these people appear to have been sophisticated, knowledgeable, and highly capable. They developed advanced technologies, created complex art and symbolic systems, built elaborate settlements, and maintained far-reaching trade and communication networks. In many ways, their achievements rivaled those of much later civilizations. These discoveries have also changed our understanding of human cultural evolution. Instead of a simple progression from primitive to advanced, it appears that human cultural development has been much more complex, with periods of high achievement followed by loss and redevelopment. The sophisticated Ice Age cultures that recent discoveries have revealed represent one of the high points of human cultural achievement. Their eventual disappearance and the loss of their knowledge represents one of the great tragedies of human history. But their legacy lives on in ways that we're only beginning to understand. The technologies they developed, the knowledge they accumulated, and the cultural traditions they established influenced all subsequent human development. Chapter 10: Legacy of the Ice Age. Architects. As we reach the end of our journey through the incredible world of Ice Age architecture, it's time to consider the lasting impact these ancient builders had on human civilization. Their influence reaches far beyond the frozen landscapes where they lived, extending through thousands of years to shape how we build and live today. The most obvious legacy of Ice Age architects can be seen in the traditional buildings of indigenous peoples around the world. The igloos of the Inuit, the tipis of Plains Indians, the yurts of Central Asian nomads, all of these structures use principles that were first developed during the Ice Age. The conical shape that appears in so many Ice Age structures became the foundation for portable architecture worldwide. This shape is inherently stable, uses materials efficiently, and sheds wind and precipitation naturally. It's no accident that cultures around the world independently develop similar solutions to the challenges of building portable, weather-resistant homes. The underground and earth-sheltered building techniques pioneered by Ice Age people have also had a lasting impact. Throughout history, people living in harsh climates have used similar strategies for staying warm and comfortable. The root cellars of colonial America, the underground houses of the Great Plains pioneers, and even modern earth-sheltered homes all use the same basic principles that Ice Age people discovered. The earth is an excellent insulator, and building into the ground provides natural climate control. In recent decades, these ancient techniques have gained new relevance as architects and builders look for energy-efficient, environmentally sustainable building methods. Many of the cutting-edge green building techniques being developed today are actually rediscoveries of principles that Ice Age people mastered thousands of years ago. Passive solar design, thermal mass construction, natural ventilation systems, and earth sheltering are all modern applications of Ice Age building wisdom. Contemporary architects studying these ancient techniques are finding solutions to modern energy and environmental challenges. The social aspects of Ice Age architecture have also had lasting influence. The idea that buildings should be designed to bring communities together, rather than isolate individuals, can be traced back to the communal hearths and shared spaces of Ice Age homes. The central fireplace that was the heart of every Ice Age dwelling became the model for the family hearth that remained central to home design for thousands of years. Even today, when fireplaces are no longer necessary for heating, they remain popular features that create focal points for family gathering and social interaction. The Ice Age understanding that building design should respond to local climate and available materials became a fundamental principle of vernacular architecture worldwide. Before the modern era of global trade and standardized building materials, people everywhere built using local resources and techniques adapted to local conditions, just as Ice Age people had done. This approach created the distinctive regional building styles that give different parts of the world their unique architectural character. The adobe houses of the southwest, the log cabins of the northern forests, the stone cottages of Ireland all represent the same basic approach to building that Ice Age people pioneered. The Ice Age emphasis on multifunctional design has also had lasting influence. Ice Age people couldn't afford to waste space or materials, so every element of their building served multiple purposes. This efficiency-focused approach influenced building design throughout history and is particularly relevant today as we face challenges of resource scarcity and environmental sustainability. Modern tiny house movements, efficient apartment design, and sustainable building practices all echo the Ice Age understanding that good design maximizes function while minimizing resource use. The technological innovations of Ice Age builders also had far-reaching consequences. Their development of specialized tools for construction, their understanding of material properties, and their solutions to structural engineering problems laid the groundwork for all subsequent building technology. The techniques they developed for working with bone, stone, wood, and other natural materials provided the foundation for later advances in construction technology. Many of the basic principles they discovered about load distribution, structural stability, and material efficiency are still used in modern engineering. Perhaps most importantly, Ice Age architects demonstrated that humans could successfully adapt to extreme environmental challenges through intelligent design and community cooperation. This lesson has been crucial throughout human history as people have faced new environmental challenges and moved into new territories. The success of Ice Age communities in surviving and thriving in harsh conditions provided a model for human adaptability that has been repeated countless times throughout history. From the Arctic explorers of the 19th century to the space program of the 20th century, humans have drawn on the same basic strategies of careful planning, appropriate technology, and group cooperation that Ice Age people pioneered. The artistic and cultural aspects of Ice Age architecture have also had lasting influence. The idea that buildings should be more than just functional shelters, that they should express cultural values, spiritual beliefs, and aesthetic sensibilities, can be traced back to the decorated and symbolically meaningful structures of Ice Age communities. The cave paintings, carved decorations, and meaningful arrangements of structural elements found in Ice Age sites establish the principle that architecture should engage the human spirit as well as serve practical needs. This understanding has been central to architectural design throughout history. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new aspects of Ice Age architectural achievement. Advanced imaging technology, computer modeling, and scientific analysis are providing ever more detailed understanding of how these ancient structures were designed and built. This ongoing research is not just of historical interest. As we face modern challenges of climate change, resource scarcity, and sustainable development, the solutions developed by Ice Age people offer valuable insights for contemporary problems. Their understanding of how to live comfortably with minimal energy use, how to build using local and renewable materials, and how to create communities that support individual and collective well-being provides guidance for creating more sustainable ways of living today. The legacy of Ice Age architects also includes important lessons about the relationship between humans and their environment. These ancient builders didn't try to dominate or control nature. They learned to work with natural forces and cycles to create comfortable, sustainable lifestyles. Their deep understanding of local ecosystems, seasonal patterns, and natural resources allowed them to live successfully in some of the harshest environments on Earth without causing environmental damage. This approach offers an alternative to the resource-intensive, environmentally destructive building practices that have become common in the modern world. As we face increasing environmental challenges, the wisdom of Ice Age architects becomes more relevant than ever. Their demonstration that humans can live comfortably and successfully while working with rather than against natural systems provides hope and guidance for creating a more sustainable future. The story of Ice Age architecture is ultimately a story about human creativity, intelligence, and adaptability. These ancient builders faced challenges that would seem impossible to overcome, Yet they not only survived but created sophisticated, comfortable, and beautiful homes that supported rich cultural lives. Their achievements remind us that humans have always been capable of remarkable innovation when faced with necessity. The technologies they developed, the social systems they created, and the wisdom they accumulated continue to influence how we live today. As we settle into sleep at the end of our long journey through Ice Age architecture, we can take comfort in knowing that we are the inheritors of an incredible legacy of human achievement. The same creativity, intelligence, and determination that allowed our Ice Age ancestors to build warm homes in frozen landscapes continues to flow through us today. Their story is our story, a testament to the remarkable capability of humans to adapt, innovate, and thrive in the face of any challenge. The homes they built were more than just shelters from the cold. They were monuments to the enduring human spirit and symbols of our species' endless capacity for survival and success. Sweet dreams, and remember, you carry within you the same remarkable heritage of human ingenuity that allowed our ancestors to turn the frozen wilderness of the Ice Age into a home.